Romance Readings Part 1. Part 2 will be on later on today with MD New hosting it. I'm Kevin Clare, and with me today is Jamie Sands, who lives in Auckland, writes many genres, including horror, romantic comedy, urban fantasy, and mysteries. And Jamie also has an alter ego who writes romance. Tell us about your alter ego, Jamie.
I actually have two alter egos, but I'm just going to talk about one of them.
Okay. So, you've got a split personality all over the place.
One.
Exactly.
So this is the first book in my Jackson Knight series, rival print Fairyland romances. So under Jackson, it's like sweet Hallmark movie-esque romance, because that's really big in traditional male-female romance, but there wasn't a lot of it in MM when I got started. So I set them all at a theme park I invented called Fairyland, which is definitely not Disneyland or Universal Studios.
But I know it's based on Tokyo Disney World, isn't it?
Tokyo Disney Resort, yeah.
Okay.
My favourite place on earth.
I understand. I totally understand. Also with me today is Rebecca Langham, who today is reading from the works of her alter ego, Cara Ripley. So where did this romantic pen name come from?
Well, I am a massive sci-fi fantasy nerd, and it was actually really out of character for me to write romance, although I've now written a couple of them. So when I was looking for a name to reflect the fact that if someone picked up one of these books, it was going to be really different to what I print under Rebecca Langham, I still went with sci-fi stuff. So Kara is the name of one of my favorite characters from Battlestar Galactica, Starbuck, Kara Thrace. Yeah. And Ripley is from Aliens, Ellen Ripley. So they're two of my sci-fi female favorite characters that I just absolutely love and think that we needed much more of, especially Ripley when she was first brought into the spotlight. It was, really quite new and unusual at the time to have a character like her. So yeah, even my romance name has sci-fi nerd agenda behind it.
I think that's good. Look, Rebecca lives in the Blue Mountains, which is about an hour's drive north of me here in Sydney, Australia. She has majors in English, history, gender studies, and education from the University of New England. So she's a pretty smart woman. Also, you are. Also with me today is KJ. Now, KJ is here with me from Melbourne. She started writing interesting life observations, literary articles, poetry, creative non-fiction, and personal essays. And somehow these all blended together to become her first book. How do you combine all of that in a first book, KJ? Oh, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Now I'm not muted.
Yay.
Okay.
So how does all that go into one book?
My first book was a book called Learning to Swim, which is basically a novelization of a self-help manual. So that's where the life observations and the literary articles and personal experience kind of all smushed together, because it's all about dealing with life change and mental illness and stuff like that. But I've always done that. I've always written sort of poetically or metaphorically. So it's contemporary romance that I focus on. And I love playing in that genre. It's lovely with people's psychologies.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm going to ask you more about that later on. So, as I said before, my name is Kevin Clare. I'm here in Sydney. I have a dystopian novel. I have many urban fantasy come magic realism novels. And I have a couple of romance novellas, which I was actually going to read from today. But I changed my mind. I'm going to read a romantic piece from one of my urban fantasies, which is basically about a menage a trois or a possible menage a trois. So it's romance-based. Now, before we begin, audiences watching now, if on YouTube, if you'd like to ask questions for any of us, please type them in the comments field of the YouTube stream. That's where we'll be able to answer them, and I'll be able to see them where I am now. But let's begin our reads. I'm going to ask Jamie to go first. What are you reading from today?
Just unmuted myself and then immediately muted myself again. Okay, I'm reading from Rival Princes. This is the first book from the Fairyland series. It's the whole series is very tropey. So this one is the rivals to lovers trope. It's right there in the title. So what you need to know is this is Dash. He is Prince Justice. He plays Prince Justice in the park. So he dresses up, he goes out, and he meets people. He's been working towards this role for many, many years. Nate comes in. He wasn't even interviewing for a prince role. He was going to do something else. And they're like, actually, you look exactly like Prince Bella, so we're going to put you in that role instead. So we've got one character who's worked really hard for it and one who just kind of waltzed in. And this is from Nate's point of view. He's been at the park a couple of days and he's done some basic training, but he's got to, and Dash has already kind of said some stuff about how he doesn't think Nate should be around. He shouldn't have to just waltz in like he did. So this is from Nate's point of view. Staying out of Dashiell's way wasn't as easy as Nate had anticipated. In fact, it was impossible. They had to get ready in the same changing room. Nate had spent 2 more days as a handler, and then Lennon proclaimed him ready for his full day of Prince Vela training. It started off easy enough with a rewatch of the cartoon movie that Vela featured in. Then Lennon took him to Dashiell. Nate grabbed Lennon's arm and talked to them in a hushed tone. Couldn't one of the other guys do it? Who would be better? He's been at this for years and he knows the Prince stuff inside out. Okay, but Nate started. Lennon cut him off. Besides, he's brilliant at it. Haven't you seen the Prince Justice hashtag on Instagram and Twitter? No, Nate sighed. This job had more facets to it than he'd anticipated. He hated feeling like he was behind before he'd even started. You should check it out. Social media is important on this job. Lennon turned to look over at Neve, who was waving to them. Just a second. They turned back to Nate. Face it, you two are stuck with each other. You might as well make the most of it. Lennon softened a little then and patted Nate on the back. He's great at this and you're a natural. Take the guidance and ignore his bad attitude. Nate nodded and took a breath, steeling himself. Okay, thanks, Lennon. I will. And hey, you never know. Maybe you can charm him into liking you. Nate raised an eyebrow. He wasn't sure there was enough charm in the world for that. Dashiell and Nate spent the rest of the day in one of the green rooms in the back lot, both dressed in workout clothes. Dashiell looked over as Nate pulled on his shoes, his eyebrows drawn down and together, and he was frowning. For once, it seemed like they agreed on something. We're going to start with posture and gait, Dashiell said. He looked Nate up and down critically. Well, your posture isn't bad at least, but you have to lift from your core at all times. Like this? Nate straightened his spine and tensed his abs some. Dashiell looked him over again and frowned. Almost, I guess. You can always be better though. Watch me. He walked across the room, demonstrating what Nate had already come to think of as the Prince Justice walk. It did look good. It's a really impressive walk, Dash, Nate said, meaning it. Call me Dashiell. Only my friends call me Dash, Dashiell said. Nate prickled. What a jerk thing to say, he thought. His spine stiffened, and he channeled it into trying the same kind of straight-back, flowing walk that Dashiell had demonstrated. No, you're too tense. You have to have your back straighter. Dashiell folded his arms and tipped his head to one side. Nate looked down at his feet, tried to straighten his back more. Like that? Dash planted his hand in the small of Nate's back. Lift through here. Nate cleared his throat. Dashiell's hand was warm and firm. He felt heat radiating over his back. He swallowed, tried to ignore that and the gentle aroma of his cologne, which was sort of lemony. I can do this. He put his shoulders back. Then Dashiell put his other hand on his stomach. Engage the muscles here. Tighten them up and then walk. Nate nodded and cleared his throat. His whole body was alert to the 2 places Dashiell was touching him, and he was at once eager to try, but he also wanted to stay put. Got it, he said. Dashiell's hands fell away and he tried to walk again, this time consciously engaging his core. Better, Dashiell said. Nate turned to see Dashiell looking away, picking up a small towel and dabbing at his face. Nate's shoulders slumped and his abs disengaged again. But you weren't even watching. Dashiell scowled and looked away. His jaw worked for a moment before he replied, Yes, I was, and you still suck, but now you suck a little less. Dashiell tossed the towel back to the bench with some force. You know what? You could at least try to be a bit nicer, Nate said. Heat flooded his body. Whatever he'd said to Lennon, he couldn't just ignore this. I don't actually respond well to the Full Metal Jacket boot camp style of teaching. Sorry to disappoint you, but I don't do nice. Not to pretty boy upstarts who waltz their way into my Dashiell caught himself and into their dream jobs without paying any dues or working up to it like the rest of us. Nate blinked at him, taken aback, not just by the stutter where Dashiell had talked about his own dream job, but by the paying dues comment. Is that what this is about? You're pissed I didn't start off 10 years ago as a janitor? Dashiell folded his arms over his chest, his eyebrows shooting up towards his hairline as he took a step back. I guess I don't look like the kind of guy who'd stand up for himself, Nate thought. He couldn't explain Dashiell moving back like that otherwise. No, it's not that, Dashiell said. Then he seemed to get a hold of himself, stalked across the room to Nate. He walked with a straight back and a regal grace, perfect, except for the seething anger. Nate held his ground. How could Dashiell be so infuriating and so attractive at the same time? His heart was thumping hard. Were they about to fight? Listen up, newbie. Dashiell prodded Nate in the chest with one finger. I don't like your attitude. You swan in like I don't even know what, and then everyone just loves you right away. What's your game here? My game? Nate shook his head and backed up a step. His temper had melted away a little in the face of Dashiell's up-close fury. Nate's back hit the wall of the green room as he took another step away from Dashiell. He wasn't sure how they'd got there, and Dashiell was so angry now. He wanted to defuse the situation if he could. He didn't want to fight. I don't have a game. Is this just a job for you? Dashiell crowded closer to Nate, looming over him. He had at least 3 inches on him. Nate swallowed. There was that lemony smell again, and his teeth were so white and even. No, Nate said. His voice came out a lot breathier than he'd meant. Because it's more than a job to me, Dashiell snarled. His breath smelled of mint. This is my life, and if you screw this up for me, I'm going to make sure you not only lose your job, but you can never show your face here again. Nate nodded. Yes, okay, sir. Nate closed his eyes and tried to push his way backwards through the wall. Why had he said that? Why had he called him sir? Dashiell wasn't his boss. Nate couldn't think straight. His mouth wasn't cooperating. His heart raced. He opened his eyes again. Dashiell was right there, peering at him, his intense blue eyes seeming to drill into him. Dashiell's lips parted. Nate looked at those lush lips and felt his own part, heard himself panting all of a sudden. Dashiell was so close. He had all but pinned Nate to the wall. Did you just call me sir? Nate inhaled, looking into Dashiell's eyes. I want, Nate breathed, but he trailed off because he couldn't say you, could he? Dashiell seemed to be about to punch him, and all Nate wanted was him. And then Dashiell kissed him. It was hot and hard, his tongue flicking out to lick Nate's lower lip. Nate forgot to breathe. His arms went around Dashiell's neck with no input from his brain. He kissed him back. What is happening? Dashiell pushed with his jaw, and Nate tipped his head a little to the side. He made a soft noise in his throat, which he hadn't meant to do, but right now his body was doing all sorts of things he didn't mean it to do. His mind blurred with conflicting thoughts. I shouldn't be doing this, but he's so hot, and this kiss is so good, and he literally hates me, but he's kissing me. He's kissing me, and he can't stand me. I can't stand him, and this kiss is amazing. Despite the heat of the kiss, Dashiell pulled back, his chest heaving. This is ridiculous, Dashiell said, his voice near a growl. Nate nodded, then pulled him in for another kiss. Dashiell responded by pressing his body against Nate's, and in an instant, Nate's brain had gone from a flurry of thoughts to just one. This feels so right.
Lovely. I loved Blue Eyes drilled into him. That just stuck with me. So much attitude in that. What was the inspiration for that book?
Rivals to Lovers is a trope, just in general. But also I just love the idea because I mean it's not a spec fic book, it's contemporary fiction, but I love the idea that there's this kind of fake magical world that they live in where they're dressing up as princes, and there's a character who's a unicorn, so someone has to wear a fursuit and run around as a unicorn. And just sort of imagining these people who have to pretend to be so happy and friendly all day. What are they really like behind the scenes with each other?
I love that. I'm just going to ask you one question, and then we'll continue with our readings. We'll have a little chat to each of our guests, and then we'll have a general chat about writing romance in general. But I want to know more about the Witchy Fiction project.
Oh, yeah. So Witchy Fiction is something that a bunch of New Zealand spec fic authors did last year. We were just about to go into lockdown, or we'd just heard a lot of news. We're going into lockdown and we were all kind of feeling awful. So we decided what we wanted to do was write some books that were optimistic and friendly. So we did these novellas. They're all set around different places in New Zealand. They all have a witch main character. And there's a whole lot of different pairings. So my one is Overdues and Occultism. It is MM. There's also standard MF. There's FF. There's one which is MFF. So it's just novella length, so quite quick and easy to read. Shared universe, so we've got some crossovers between the books, which is quite fun. But yeah,
I love doing that myself.
Still coming out. Yeah,
Okay.
some of us launched in September, but there's still more coming out at the moment, different authors.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jamie. We're going to go to KJ next, who's going to unmute herself. And what are you reading from today?
I am going to read from this book, Art of Magic. Oh, that's very close, isn't it? Yeah. Now, I love my cover designer. She's the most amazing person in the world. I know she's up for a Goldie for cover design, so I'm so thrilled for her. Completely irrelevant point. That's right. I'm going to read from Art of Magic. Now, this is not my most recent book, but I like the little excerpt that I'm reading. The two main characters for this book are Kath, who is an English teacher, and Rika, who is an art teacher. And I'm reading chapter 2. So in chapter 1, Kath and Rika have met at a bar at a teachers' conference and have a little bit of a flirt session. And Rika leaves, and Kath, who's really good at flirting, is annoyed at herself because she forgot to get Rika's number. So we start chapter 2 at the first day, the people-free day, where all the kids they have like 3 days before the kids start back. I rolled my head around in a slow circle and sighed deeply. God, I was tired. The supposedly short visit to my parents at Sandhurst had turned into a 14-day time warp. Sleeping in my old room was beyond disturbing, as Mum still maintained it like some sort of shrine. We'd had another terse discussion about that very point on the 4th day, but the strained atmosphere had absolutely nothing to do with screen-printed cushions, tassels, quilted bedspreads, and distressed wood side tables. Dad had stumbled against the back of the couch later in my visit, complaining of a headache, which, I found out, had been an ongoing problem for weeks. That particular fact had caused a genuine argument. For God's sakes, Mum, why the hell didn't you phone me? I stomped about in the old-fashioned kitchen, pacing the black and white vinyl tiles. Don't take that time with me, Catherine. You heard Dr. Keeley. Apparently your father's blood pressure is wonky, and that may be the reason for the headaches. Mum's hands were rolled into fists and planted on her hips, so I arranged my arms over my chest in defiance and leaned back at cupboards, the traditional postures of a mother-daughter standoff. Dr. Keeley is a GP. I'm sure she's awesome, but why didn't she send him for tests or scans or something? I dropped my shoulders and stared. Mum? She blinked quickly and swallowed. I don't want her to send him to get tests, she said quietly. I screwed up my face. Why the hell not? Mum's jaw clenched. Because they might find something awful, Kath. Her lips were shaking. Oh, Mum, I said, uncrossing my arms, then pushed off the cupboards and taking the 3 steps across the floor, folded her into a hug. I decided not to address the selfishness of her no-test justification. It wasn't the time. Dad was the typical stoic, completely in denial, laconic Australian male, and of course created his own interpretation of Dr. Keeley's advice and took it easy for the rest of my visit. This consisted of him reading the paper, shaking his head at the TV as politicians flustered and blustered, and sleeping, while Mum operated as an assembly line of food and cups of tea for both Dad and I, and were the various townsfolk who dropped by the house to greet me as if I was the long-lost daughter, suddenly reappearing after years in the outback. The reminder that I'd visited my little hometown only 4 months ago fell on deaf ears. Neighbours brought food and exclamations. Why, you look just the same. You're not letting living in the big city change you, are you? Oh, you haven't found a fellow yet. That's a shame. Each night, I wanted to check my forehead for bruising as a result of metaphorically banging my head against nearby flat surfaces. That last question, asked by Mum's well-meaning and nosy friends, meant that as a coping strategy, I spent a lot of time mentally reciting the numbers 1 to 10 like a highly tutored toddler. It had been tempting to blurt out my bisexual status at various pauses in conversations and rave about the sexiness of Rika from the conference and exactly what I wanted to do with her if we were ever stuck in an elevator. I loved my town, but it frustrated the heck out of me, so the first day of semester 2 couldn't come quickly enough. I leaned back in my seat in the school's auditorium and crossed my jeans-clad legs. I still wasn't convinced that the only thing wrong with Dad was dodgy blood pressure. Something else was going on. I made a mental note to call them that night. It would need to be an actual phone call, not a text, as Mum refused to acknowledge that particular function. If I wanted to write something to someone, I'd send a proper letter. Even an email is more acceptable than an LOL and one of those happy faces with appendages, she'd declared only last month. I pinched the skin between my eyes, and I loved my parents dearly, but Mum's stance on some aspects of the world was unshakable. It made life interesting. The clicking of heels across the stage at the front of the auditorium announced the arrival of my principal. According to quite a few members of staff, Felicity Davis, in her slim 6-foot frame in Jimmy Choo heels, suits straight out of Vogue magazine's businesswear section, pixie-cut hair, it was a 53-year-old indomitable force of nature, rumoured to possess X-ray vision. My previous interactions with Felicity, both on and off campus, had created a sort of familiarity that was more than simply principal and staff member. Attending the red carpet premiere of Abby's movie, Discreet Liaison, had brought Felicity and I together into a whole new social circle that was completely terrifying. Slipping down a little in my seat, I watched as she cleared her throat once, and after the 2.3 seconds it took for the staff of 200 to settle, began her start of semester 2 speech. Good morning, everyone. Felicity's husky voice held the audience captive. I trust you all had a restorative holiday. We are about to undertake 2 days professional development before the return of students on Wednesday. During this time, I would like faculties and other staff to reconstruct their policy on... I tuned her out. Pulling at the fitted wool top that had bunched slightly under my breasts, my head of English, Sarah Clark, would be all over the instructions. In fact, it's probably highly probable that Sarah was recording a speech so she could play it back at the faculty meeting, and we made to take dictation. There was a general murmur in the room, and I blinked quickly, refocusing my brain. It seemed that Felicity had concluded her instructions and whatever else she had to say. I'd like to introduce the new staff. As is the case, the halfway point in any academic year brings only a few new people. However, please join me in welcoming 2 teachers to Rawson. She delivered one of her famous eyebrow quirks, for which there was an entire dictionary of meanings. Belinda Squires, who'll be teaching in the drama faculty. Belinda, probably in her late 20s, leapt eagerly from her seat, then waved as she slowly rotated on the spot like a plastic ballerina in a jewellery box, all the while beaming at the smattering of applause that generally welcomed new recruits. One of the geography teachers, 2 seats over, muttered, "Bloody hell," to no one in particular. Belinda tossed her long black hair and lowered her body to the seat, clearly having attended deportment classes in high school. Our other new staff member is joining the art faculty, Rika Diamandis. My head shot up, and I devoured the sight of Rika, 5 rows in front, standing and delivering a slight wave to the assembled staff, her white teeth flashing during her quick smile. Her tall frame was resplendent in a dark grey turtleneck sweater, denim jeans with that black hair arranged in the spiky, migrating to floppy style that was so attractive. "You have got to be kidding," I whispered, not taking my eyes off her, as she sat so that the back of her head was the only visible part of her body. Tingling memories shimmered through me as I recalled the smoky grey eyes, the chiselled features, the banter, the flirting, and the arousal.
So many fantastic characters in that, and
yep.
I agree with Jamie popped something up in our private chat here, saying the mother is way too real, and how ironic because it's Mother's Day for all of us in our part of the world. It's Sunday morning here, while the rest of the world are watching us from yesterday. That was fantastic. That was fantastic. Are any of those characters based on anyone real?
I observe people, and I love the psychology of people, and I get into how people think and how people interact. And yeah, absolutely. I have had comments about how real my characters are, how people can relate to those characters, how they see either themselves. I like to find the best in people. It's just an optimism that I have inside me. So yes, when you get Kath, who is, that was the first time I wrote in first person because she has such a strong voice, and I thought I need to write. Okay, so here's a weird thing. I actually said to people that Kath told me to write in her voice. And I was 35,000 words into my book in third person, so that's horrible. But I rewrote the entire thing in first person. It was wonderful. And then in Cats, all these people turned up. Belinda's horrible. Rika's lovely. Kath's mum is hilarious, and so she's, she doesn't like LOLs and happy faces with appendages.
I get that. Something I did want to ask you about. You mentioned earlier on, learning to swim resonated with one particular reader. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, since I've said that to you, it's not just one person. Learning to swim, there's a lot of me in that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, and then because there's a lot of me in that, and because I generalize a little bit, there's a lot of other people in that as well. And it's a lot about mental health and about how we have to realize our own psychologies and where we are ourselves before we can interact with the world.
I totally agree with that. I think all of us have to get to know ourselves. Thanks very much, KJ. Okay, Rebecca, or as alter ego Cara, are we ready?
Yeah, look, I'm really sorry about the general chaos of my household.
It's Mother's Day. It's fine.
Yeah, it's just me here with the girls, so they have a mind of their own, obviously. So this may or may not come with little intermissions from children and/or cats. We'll see how we go.
Okay.
So I'm actually gonna read off the screen, sorry, because I'm gonna read something that's not published yet, just because it's my favorite thing that I've written. Is a book that it's going to come out in a few months called Nurturing Hope. So I don't have a copy yet because it hasn't actually gone through editing. So this is the first chapter of that book, Nurturing Hope, and it is it's different to anything else that I've written. So we'll I'm sorry that I'm reading it off the screen, so hopefully that won't be too distracting. My love, if you're going to stand there, can you just be super sensitive? Oh my gosh, what an angel. Okay, so this is one of the rare stories that I wrote with an American character for an American context. Mostly I write with Australian characters, but this was a bit of an experiment. Chapter 1, California, 2019. There are a lot of things I love about living in Sacramento. For a start, there's enough distance from Silicon Valley that I can actually afford rent. Having grown up in one of the less appealing suburbs of San Francisco, being able to get a place with a bathroom built for actual human beings and a little yard space is a nice change from the sardine box I'd shared with my parents and sisters. Then there's the aesthetics of the city. Driving beyond the stoic government buildings and office spaces, citrus trees line the streets like scented sigils, and neat paved driveways stretch up to meet welcoming houses. The whole place has a real sense of home about it. The kind of comfort and connection that only can come from a well-organized city with a steady rhythm of activity. I've got routines, things I do to provide structure to my life. Early on Sundays, before I dig into my work for the day, I take my teenage foster daughter to the farmer's market. We wander through the stalls that sell the best fruit California, oh my gosh, you are a distraction, my love. The best fresh food that California has to offer. Strawberries, beets, eggs, all of it delectable. Hope says she hates our weekend excursions, but I think I'm slowly wearing her down, convincing her that maybe she isn't allergic to fresh air after all. Given the nature of my work, with most of my time spent in an office chair staring at a computer screen, getting outside, whether to the market, the gym, or like today, an off-site job, was normally a real joy. Not today. I grimaced as I scanned yet another useless street sign. Yeah, I usually love driving around Sacramento, but I don't love being completely lost when I'm meant to be at a job site taking photographs. Where the heck is this damn street? I yelled at my steering wheel, which obstinately refused to help. Surely cars should be advanced enough to get me where I need to go. I mean, it's the 21st century, and that's a basic part of the job, right? Take me from one place to another. Turn left here. The assertive New Yorker who voiced my GPS had never annoyed me more. There is no left. I waved toward the sidewalk to prove my point. I was already 15 minutes late, and the car's navigation system wasn't doing me any favors by insisting I drive straight into some poor family's front lawn. I'm not always this irritable, really. Most of the time, I'm fairly calm, but today was not my day. Does this place even exist? I drummed my fingers against the gear shift. This is your fault, car. Why can't you find Mort's Road? What am I even paying you for? I shook my head. Meet Desiree Adler, ladies, gents, and non-binary folk, the woman who drives around yelling at nobody. The fact I was arguing with a piece of software didn't deter me from swearing at her repeated instruction to turn left. It felt like whatever could go wrong that morning had gone wrong. My water heater, after weeks of whining and moaning every time someone took a shower, made a valiant last stand before finally dying in a cacophony of hoots and whistles. But of course, this happened just before I needed to wash the conditioner from my hair. Let's not even talk about what my 10-month-old Labrador did to my new jeans while I finished off my ice-cold shower. I'd planned to wear those jeans to the blind date my sister Clara had lined up for that night. Took about 60 minutes of throwing clothes about my bedroom to finally decide on a suitable replacement outfit. And even then, I settled for something that looked kind of ordinary just because I was sick of trying things on. Ginger Snaps, don't judge me, I let my boss's son name the dog, may be freaking adorable, but she's also a freaking menace. So, given the first 2 hours of my day had already been pretty crap, when the police lights flashed red and blue in my rearview mirror, you can probably imagine the whole new level of obscenities that escaped my mouth. But if you can't, it went something like this. For fucking fuck's sake, just fuck right off, fucking fucker. Don't repeat that.
Yeah.
The Monty Python team would have been proud. Shaking my head, I flicked on my turn signal and pulled over. I sighed as I tapped at the steering wheel. I wasn't sure what I'd done, but between arguing with the GPS and rolling my eyes at non-existent roads, I certainly hadn't noticed myself speeding or going through a red light. Maybe the cop needed to meet some quota for random breath tests. I just hoped he was quick about it. My boss was not exactly going to get happier the later I became. I glanced in my rearview mirror and nearly spat out the gum I'd been chewing. The cop was not a he. It was a she. And I started to wonder if she'd gotten lost on the way to the audition for a blockbuster film. There is no way a police officer on an average day at work should be allowed to be that attractive. As she sauntered toward me, I watched her move in line with my side view mirror. The officer had a dark beige complexion and long black hair pulled into a tight and high ponytail. Intelligent brown eyes rested between slightly arched eyebrows and an aquiline nose that complemented the delicious seriousness of her face. It was not normal for a real-life human being to be so beautiful. I couldn't be sure if I hated her for being stunning or if I wanted her to show me how those handcuffs worked. A confusing thought, given the way my palms always turned clammy whenever cops were around. Knock, knock. I started. I hadn't realized she was directly next to my car now. I'd been too busy salivating like a teenager and momentarily switched off from reality. I grinned awkwardly as I held the button to lower the window. As the tinted divider between us retracted, I cleared my throat. Is there an officer problem? She looked at me quizzically. Excuse me? Her voice was rich and velvety, like someone who narrated nature documentaries. Look out, Richard Attenborough. Or was it David Attenborough? I was mixing up the Jurassic Park guy with the nature guy. When I failed to respond, she asked for my license and registration, and fumbling with the glove compartment, I retrieved the documents. Focus, Desi. You're about to be fined or arrested or something. Don't act like you're unstable. I held my hand to my chest and coughed, though I had no real need to, then tried again after she checked my license. What have I done wrong? The question sounded more abrasive than I'd meant it to, and the narrowing of the police officer's eyes was a clear sign she hadn't appreciated my tone. Still, it was the best I could manage. A police stop from years ago, albeit very different to this one, had left me forever unsure about where a simple interaction with a cop might lead. The officer pulled a set of aviator sunglasses from her shirt pocket and slid them on as though preparing herself. Then she retrieved a handheld device from a pouch on her belt and started tapping, looking at the screen as she spoke again. You were traveling 30 miles per hour in a 25 zone and changed lanes without signaling. The steering wheel squeaked a little, drawing the woman's eyes to my white-knuckled fingers. Definitely did not remember changing lanes along this road. Are you sure? I asked through gritted teeth. Really was turning out to be an incredibly shitty day. The officer used the tip of her index finger to drag her sunglasses down her nose, like something out of a Michael Jackson music video. She considered me over the top rim as she spoke in a highly professional tone. Are you suggesting I've invented a traffic infringement, ma'am? Ouch. The way she'd said ma'am was not what I'd had in mind when I'd considered the handcuffs earlier. I just wanted to get away. It had been a long time since I'd had any interactions with a police officer. And though this was unlikely to end as badly as the last incident had, I could still feel my nerve endings tingle with suppressed concern. I dropped my head as I let out an exasperated sigh. No, officer, I would never suggest such a thing. Can you please issue my ticket so I can get to work? She planted a hand against the window frame and leaned forward, just enough that I could see most of my face in her sunglasses. I realized then my hair was disheveled. I'd left the house without a scrap of makeup on. I looked like I'd gotten into the car immediately after falling out of bed, without so much as a glance at a reflective surface. I can imagine your job must be important. The playful curl of her mouth made it clear she was mocking me a little, though she somehow managed to do it while maintaining a degree of stoicism. The officer's perfume reminded me of cherries, but that didn't diminish the heat of frustration creeping up my neck. I needed to get moving. These real estate photos weren't going to take themselves, and the owners wouldn't be happy about being forced to stay away even longer. My stomach fluttered as I checked the clock in my dashboard. I'm sorry. I dropped my gaze to my lap as I did my best to check my attitude, the one that had been simmering all morning and really wasn't this woman's fault. I know I'm not exactly saving lives or anything, I know that, but I would appreciate being able to make my appointment. I fully accept that I've done the wrong thing. The police officer stood straight, her muscled arm falling to her side. Name, please? Hadn't she noticed that from my license? Was her memory worse than mine? Desiree Adler? An inexplicable sort of recognition flashed in her eyes, but it disappeared so quickly that I questioned if she'd reacted at all.
When do you have a release date for that, Rebecca?
I don't have an exact date. It's sometime in the next few months. Obviously not the next 2 months. It's likely to be in the sort of third quarter of the year.
Sure. One thing I wanted to ask, how difficult or easy was it to make your character American references? I noticed beet instead of beetroot, and certain types of trees, and a couple of other things that were American. Is it hard to try to place something somewhere where you don't actually live?
Yeah, it was actually harder than writing science fiction in the future in space on a ship.
Yeah, there's so many factual things. Yes, miles instead of kilometers. And
yeah, there was. I don't actually think I've ever undertaken so much research as I have for this one, and I had to research how gravity works and how spaceships work and things for my sci-fi books. Most of my research was actually around cultural things to do with race relations and issues surrounding police brutality, because there's an underlying theme with that in the story. But I really had to rely on my American friends to help me with all those small references. There's an amazing writer friend of mine, Christina Findell, who hasn't been published yet, but only because she just hasn't put it out there. She is such an incredible writer. I can't wait until someone realizes it and prints her work. But she helped me a lot. She's from Texas, and went through and pointed out lots of things. Like I said footpath, and she's like, no, it's a sidewalk. And I called it my hot water system, and she's like, no, it's a water heater. And she did that through the entire book for me. Which was incredibly helpful, and I was very grateful to her, because there are just so many little phrases that I had not thought of. Like I spent a year reading history books and social commentary on race relations and things about police force in California, all sorts of stuff, but I didn't know to say sidewalk.
Oh, fair enough. What else have you researched, say, maybe for your first romance book?
My first little novella. So my first novella, Riding the Track under Cara Ripley, was a bit of an experiment. It was almost a dare. Someone's like, you should try romance. It's more fun to write than you think. And I'd love to re-edit that book, to be honest, and turn it into a novel, because I feel like I've learned so much since then. But that one is set in South Australia, and I haven't actually been to most of the places that I had to research for that one. But it's... So I had to research a lot about the setting in South Australia and a lot about cattle drives and things like that, because it was like a vacation cattle drive. But Yeah, look, probably some of the weirder things I had to research. I remember one day having to Google what happens to a woman's vagina after riding a horse for 3 days. Because, you know, like,
what am I? The answer? Does Google know?
Yeah. Look, Google knows lots of things, but I have to admit, you've got to be really careful because, you know, sometimes Google brings up images, related Google image searches along the top. Just think before you click, people. Anyway, so that was a fun adventure. But yeah, because I had to learn all these things about horses and horse riding because I don't know much about it at all. But the story takes place on a cattle drive. So they're riding horses for 5 days on a sort of touristy type trip. I think, you know, city slickers with lesbians in the Australian outback. And yeah, so a lot of things about setting and a lot of things about riding horses. And then, of course, the what happens to you when you're not used to riding horses. That was fun. Yeah.
Fair enough. Thanks, Rebecca, for that. That was so cool. That was really cool. Thanks very much. Okay, so now my turn now. I was going to write, I've actually got all my books here just in front of me. I just thought I'd have them. I was going to read from my proper romance novellas, which are available in one book. Little plug for myself, but no. I decided to read from one of my little urban fantasy, you know, magical realism books. This is from the second of the Angels and Actors series. It's called Drama Queens and Adult Themes. The title comes from, well, I'm old enough to remember when on Australian television, whenever a TV show was about to have, you know, something to do with homosexuality or something, they'd warn you and say it has adult themes, but they wouldn't say, oh, it has adult themes. They'd say, and adult themes, trying to entice you to watch it. So I think this will be self-explanatory. The two characters are Wade and Adam, and they're a middle-aged gay couple. Are we losing the plot? I asked Wade. In a word, yes, he replied. As he steered his car from the quiet streets of Maud's neighbourhood, I welcomed the chance to think. Think about my love for Wade. Think about my love for Mannix. Think about the possibility that this was all getting out of hand. Think about the possibility that if it got out of hand, a lot of fun would come from it. I also welcomed Wade's response to my question. Up until that point, we seemed to play along with our obsession, but not chat about it. What are we going to do about it, I asked. Wait for the car crash. Babe, you don't think we're headed for disaster. Adam, I have no idea. We're sane enough not to let this get to us, or at least we used to be. Wade turned down a beautiful leafy avenue, pulled over and parked his relatively new car in front of a sweet little brick house. The discussion had started. No use putting it on hold until we got home. The shadowy trees listened to our confessions in this street of slumber. I'm not in love with him, Wade. Me neither. But we're acting like two eager kids going through puppy love. So what are your fantasies? He leaned forward and rested his arms on the steering wheel. Fantasies, eh, Adam? They're always about the three of us. Agreed. There are various situations I could see us all in. Like? Mannix has crept up behind me as I stir something on the pot. He reaches around and covers my eyes, and I reach down and feel for his, but he tactfully moves aside, and all I feel is his other hand. His other hand has your hand in it. Mannix has quietly snuck up to me with your hand in tow. Then he presses himself against me while he pulls at your hand so you move forward to warm his back, kind of like you and I make a little Mannix sandwich. And I realise that somehow he's exposed himself and his little hot shaft is cleverly sliding itself under my T-shirt, whetting my appetite. How did his dick get out of his pants, Adam? But that's not the point. Did I unzip it with my other hand? If it makes sense to you, Wade, then yes. No, that doesn't make sense. My hand would still be on his cock and you'd feel it under your T-shirt. Maybe you let go of it just in time. What? just when we were sandwiching him? I don't know. Ask Mannix. It's his dick. We laughed uncontrollably. We were the spark in this quiet universe of silhouetted trees and lonely houses. As our mirth slowly faded, my ageless partner leaned over and kissed me. Wade, I love you. I love you too, babe. Is this what a midlife crisis feels like? I don't think so, Adam. Why do you say that? We still love each other. So, think about it, Adam. I observed the appealing brick house we parked in front of. Someone had spent their hard-earned cash to buy it, and maybe someone had spent more money renovating it, perhaps in old-world elegance or as an understated, minimalist designer statement. They would have argued under its roof, possibly committed illegal acts in the shed, made love with the curtains open. Either way, someone had built up a past in this house just as we had in our home. There was no chance in hell I was going to give all that up. You're right, we're still madly in love, I said. Neither of us is stupid enough to believe that we've fallen for Mannix. We're just going through a phase. True, Adam. And let's not forget Simon and Jean. Now there's a midlife crisis. Oh God, yes. I can see why a trapeze artist would be a good catch to a man with an uptight wife, but at least he could have stopped to think about what he was getting himself into. 2 bratty kids to a second marriage when he should have been thinking about retirement. Yeah, and that Oscar and his little peeing problem. A 6-year-old shouldn't still be wearing nappies when they visit friends. Wade started the engine. They claim it's a medical condition, Adam. Medical condition, my ass. He wants attention, and Simon is past parenting age. As for that trapeze artist, well, there's a circus short of a clown. I'll stop there. Guys, thank you for being here. I've decided to, because we're getting close to the hour, and I know some of us have to rush off to other sessions for Icarus, but before we go, one by one, I'd like you to promote your website and your socials. So I'll start with KJ first. KJ, where can people find you?
On Facebook, KJ Lesvik, one word. I'm mostly on Twitter. It's mostly author stuff and then just irreverent rubbish. That's at Property of KJ. And that's pretty much it. I used Instagram, but I don't know how it functions, so I just put pictures up and then hope people find them. So I just, those 3 areas.
Fantastic. Jamie, where can people find you?
So I'm on most places as Jamie Sands author. I've put it on the info swap thing on the Discord. I am also on TikTok, which is a weird place to be.
Do you do little dances or anything?
I haven't done any dances yet. No, I'm resisting dances. Under Jamie Drake 1800. And the Jackson Knight has a Facebook page as well. So if you look up Jackson Knight, JAXON Knight, yeah.
Okay, Rebecca, where can people find you?
I just have a website, which is my name with .com.au, so rebeccalangham.com.au. I don't use Facebook as much as I used to these days. I'm on Twitter a fairly decent amount, so that's rlangham85. And I don't really use Instagram or Snapchat either, but yeah, Twitter and my website, you can definitely find me.
Fair enough. And if anyone wants to find me, that's how I spell my surname, Klehr. My website is kevinclair.com. I'm mostly on Twitter, same at Kevin Clare. If you go to my Twitter account, there is a link tree that shows all my other accounts, my Instagram, my Facebook author page, and my YouTube. Guys, all of you, thank you for being part of Romance Reads today. Part 1 for our Icarus audience. Part 2 will be hosted by MD New, I think in about an hour's time. But thank you for being here, and thanks very much, guys. They were great reads.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
It was good.